Well, good afternoon, everybody. So, where does well get going? I mean, if there's a big rush of a crowd here, that's great, but in the interim, we'll just start with the group that we have. Phil, how are you? Good seeing you again. Just before we introduce our speaker today and go into the presentation that he has for us, I just wanted to comment on, again, what the LEPC may have to tackle from time to time. And this week we were preparing for this major winter storm that was pouncing, upon, the region. But thankfully we didn't get pounced on Cape Cod. And I kept watching some of the news as the day went on. We had some, communication from from the REPC in Barnstable, and we were listening to our resident meteorologist Frank O'Laughlin, and him trying to explain the difficulty in trying to forecast such a big, intense storm that's forming and coming through, and how it was shaping, and how it was going to end up rolling back on New England. And later on in the day, I was just noticing how nice it was outside. And then at the same time watching the news, seeing 30 inches of snow in western New England, and just thinking that if you drove an hour or two in that direction, you would have been hitting some serious weather. And here it was nothing. So, the LEPC, for what it's worth, was ready. We set the room up in case we had to mobilize and activate some of our personnel to address any storm-related concerns, which thankfully we didn't have happen. One of the major players in any type of storm is Eversource, and they have a very good activation process. They let us know ahead of time how they're going to ramp up their services. So when everything's perfect in their jurisdiction, because Eversource doesn't necessarily have places, work in Vermont or some other areas, but Eversource, for all intents and purposes, calls a beautiful day like this a blue sky day. So when they're in normal operations, it's called blue sky operations. Anything beyond that, if there's a storm related, they have different levels. And the levels are all based on what the anticipated power loss is going to be and how many residents or customers are going to be affected. So I think this one was considered a 3, because it was going to be like, say, 70,000 more. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but say if there's going to be 70,000 residents or more, then that's how they start to ramp up their resources. They bring in resources from outside of New England. They start to stage things. So if you happen to be at the mall, the day of the storm, there were about 15 to 20 trucks all ready to go with ancillary support. I think there was a few at the plaza too. I saw a couple of trucks parked there, but at the peak of the storm, I think we only had about 5 or 10 customers that had lost power, and of those, it was on like one street. So we really dodged a major storm here. The winds weren't what they expected. I think the top gust maybe been 40 maybe at the most, but they were talking about 55 mile or greater gusts. I don't think we had that. We had a lot of rain. There was a few snowflakes at night, but I was going to bed and I saw them like, oh great, we're gonna have a couple inches. That didn't even happen. Woke up in the morning, it was all gone. So, but regardless, the communication's there, the algorithm that they utilize to prepare for any event that's going to affect the region is in place. All the players got together, and we had 2 phone calls from the REPC, and we discussed things. We get an update from Eversource, from Verizon, Comcast, and National Grid, and they participate, then the local towns that have some input. And the other major player in this is the MAC, the Multi-Agency Coordination Center. They're the ones who can get resources for us. They did stand up for about 12 or 14 hours, I think, or 24. But they were available, and they had somebody in their office. So if we did have any issues, that's the number that we would call if we started to have major impacts in our community. But they came down like in the early evening as well as Eversource. So once again, you know, I think for us, because of our ongoing efforts with these meetings and talking about it as much as we do and partnering with all that we have available to us, I think that, you know, we're as prepared as we can when we're planning for something. You know, a major event that happens, you know, out of the blue, that's one thing. It's going to take a little bit to get ramped up, but all the pieces are in place for us to make those decisions and to get ourselves situated in here. So everything for us is through the floor jacks. We have boxes all set up. We just pull them out, not two, but just one, right? And we set them all up, and the room's all ready to go, and all we have to do is we can get our staff in here probably within a half hour. We can have our ELC up and running. So, you know, we're pretty confident that we can manage anything that comes our way. So I just wanted to talk about that. We really haven't had much else going on since the last meeting, so which is good. And I think everybody can attest to the fact that this winter has been pretty mild altogether. Let's continue that. Spring is Monday, so that's even better. It's still hard to get used to the time change because it's dark when you wake up, but it's light later on in the day, which is nice. So we'll continue to, you know, to go through these meetings until we're done for the summer, and anything comes up, Kim will throw things to you. But in the interim, if we have something of interest, we're going to try and you know, bring it to you. So that being said, we got Brian Urquhart. He's from Hui, and you know, for all intents and purposes, he's the assistant director, right? So with facilities and services, and he also gets himself involved in any winter related weather events down in Hui, and they're a big partner as well with us. And whether it's inspectional services that we have to you know, interact with once in a while, because there's a lot of building projects that are ongoing down there, and we get to you know, to get updates on that. So it's very helpful that we you know, maintain good relations. They got a lot of property. They're all in different places. There's some you know, facilities that have a lot of concerns for us, hazards and such, but the work that they do, the oversight, the safety concerns, they have a class act going on down there, so we never worry about any problems. And if they do call us, we know that there's a reason why they're calling us. So, but we wanted to have you know, Brian provide a little bit of an update. He's going to give us his presentation, and I'll turn it over to you. You got 2-3 hours. You're all set.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming over. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Nice to see him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen that often.
It may.
Nothing quite yet. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chief, for the introduction.
Sure.
Yeah, once again, my name is Brian Urquhart. Work at Hui. Prior to being over there, I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps. I was a military policeman, and then I went on to the Special Reaction Team, and I did border patrol stuff. We try to keep the people and the drugs from coming over from one side to the other. And then once that was done, I went to school, and I got in facilities somehow. I have no idea. So here I am, in any case. So with that real bad cold spell that we just had recently, we had to, so that's kind of a one-off for us, considering we've got about 70 buildings, some more important than others. A lot of activity going on, a lot of people in and out, a lot of leaky windows and doors and roofs and whatnot. So that being said, that one day when they had a forecast for that super cold morning and night, and so a group of us got together. We did a spreadsheet, came up with all of our, I guess kind of what we described as our more important buildings, ones that could cause a lot of problems if something leaks, something freezes and leaks, anything like that. So we sat down, and let's pull this up for you real quick. So these are kind of deemed our more important buildings. We went through, so we've got, I don't know if anybody knows, but we've got essentially like 4 campuses. We've got our Quisic campus, we've got our Village campus, we've got our North Quisic campus, and we've got our Oyster Pond dormitories and condos, essentially. So we sort of went through everything and broke it up into villages and came up with this list of buildings. We went through right away. We said, okay, is there any action needed, yes or no? And if yes, what do we need to do? And as you can see, you check louvers and boiler rooms for the Bigelow building, which is right down on the water. So this is just a list, like I said, that we all put together. We sat down as a group, and it was a good team effort. We had a lot of good input as far as what needs to get done, what doesn't need to get done, what we should be looking at more so than others. So with this information, so since that was kind of a one-off with that cold spell, we're going to take this information that we had and we're going to put this into what's called our CEMP. It's our Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, and we update it every, I think 2 years. We're on version 17 right now, and 18 we're waiting for signatures. And what that plan does is it covers everything from an explosion on campus to weather-related events, hurricanes, tornadoes, what have you, to bomb threats. So we have kind of everything in between, and it's a dynamic document because things are always changing. And because of the super cold weather event that we just had, we've got a lot to put into it now, into our weather section, because we don't have a specific section in there for cold weather. We just say winter weather. And because this event was so extreme, we've learned a ton from it, and now we know we got to get this section in there too. And we just updated it recently due to COVID. We've never had anything in there for any kind of viruses taking populations out, so we had to redo it for that also. So we cover a little bit of everything through it. So with this, like I said, with this information that we have here, we're going to transfer some of this into that plan and then work it through the system so everybody kind of knows what we're doing, what they need to do, and so on and so forth. So I'll show you briefly this. So this is just a section that I took out to start severe weather procedure. So this document's 80-something pages, I think, and like I said, it covers pretty much everything that we can think of. Like I said, we're constantly redoing it and taking things out, adding things and whatnot. So you can see here, this is the hurricane procedures that we have. I think we have it classified into 4 different categories depending on severity. And then kind of a checklist here. I haven't been down there for any hurricanes, so I think we used this once for, we had a storm a couple of summers ago. Oh, when we were getting ready, there was that possible hurricane that we didn't get, but the waters came super high and they flooded out some of our docks and whatnot. So we do get together before that. We go over this list with our facilities personnel, make sure everybody checks off the boxes, then we collect it at the end, and then they add notes and whatnot to it, so we can once again update our plan, so we're better prepared for these types of events. So as you can see, there's a lot of information on here, and I won't bore you with all of it, but section 3. So all we have in here right now for cold weather is winter storms. So when we have a major winter storm that we know is coming, or like the super cold event that we had, we've got to make sure that all of our generators are full, obviously. Portable generators, standalone generators. We're under contract with Loud Fuel to ensure that they've got tankers that can constantly come in on whatever kind of time frame that we're looking for, depending on how long we're going to need them for. We have things like that going on. We have to go around, we have to make sure all the roofs are free of debris, all of our roof drains. Like I said, with 70 plus buildings, it's a lot of work. It's we're literally there 24/7 already for these things. And particularly for this last event, the cold event, we had people there from Thursday through Monday, and they would sleep in one of the offices when they had the opportunity to and whatnot. Because this last event, we found out that we need more information on our building list. We had some sprinkler heads freeze. We had boilers that just shut down on us, so we had no heat in some of our buildings. So then we got to frantically run around and get parts and pieces for things, and we got guys soldering new pipe and shutting things off, and so it's a lot of work, a lot of sleepy people running around, unfortunately. So for events like that, like I said, we make sure our generators are ready to roll. We make sure that we have any kind of tools that might be needed to remove trees. We have all of our trucks are gassed up, ready to go. So we're pretty specific about what we need to do, and people have been through it enough, and we actually do some training on this. We'll go through particular scenarios, and we'll ask people questions, what would you do if this happened? That's how we typically know if people have actually read some of the stuff. And you find out a lot through doing that. So anyway, so like I said, with this cold event, we're gonna add a section to this, to try to cover a lot of what we just went through with all the buildings and whatnot. And hopefully we'll come out on top next time a little bit better than we did this past time. So let me think, anything else? Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have individual generators for each building, or do you have like a bigger generator for a group of?
That's a good question. Depending on I guess I'll say the proximity of the buildings. Some of them will have maybe like 3 big buildings on one good sized generator, 750 kV or something like that. And obviously with generator power, the only things that typically on backup power are your emergency systems. And you might have some outlets in which the scientists need so they can keep experiments running 24/7 if they need to. And then we have a ton of portable small generators due to all the small houses that we have in the village. So right before storms happen, we make sure we get all the generators set up, gassed, and stored in front of all the spots that we basically need them in. And on top of that too, we do a lot of sandbags also, because we get a lot of runoff that flood some of our buildings. And one I can think of in particular, we were walking through a building after a real bad rainstorm, and water was coming in through the keyhole on a door. So much water was on the other side of that thing, and we're like, whoa, everybody like took off. Yeah, I've never seen that much water before. It just flushed down the hill, flooded out this basement area where some science had special equipment and whatnot, and the water got all up to the door, and it was coming out the keyhole. So we have things like that, and we don't know where we need sandbags until something like that happens. So that was another learning experience that we had out there. Yeah, so we have it's very, very, very busy place, very busy. Phones are on 24/7. Like we got Governor Healy's out there today, so we've been spending the whole week getting the dock prepped for her, making sure that we don't have anything on the ground that anybody's gonna trip on or anything like that. So yeah, it's busy and fun. Else have any other questions at all?
Brian, this particular storm, what would you say as a whole, because I imagine you have kind of like a hot wash after the storm. As a whole, what was probably, one, the biggest issue you faced, and 2, the biggest lesson you learned?
So, a major issue that we had, there was so we've got about 77 facilities personnel out there, and about a quarter of them, me included, had problems at our houses as well as at work. I had some pipes freeze at my house, and my circulator pump stopped working from a heating system. So I'm trying to take care of that, but I also gotta get back to work because we've got a job to do there also. We've got to maintain those buildings as best as we possibly can. So that's a big one that we had. This particular outing, we learned different areas that the air penetrates through. So we know that for next time now. So we won't be losing sprinkler heads. As soon as those sprinkler systems freeze and then thaw, and it's a mess. And so we had that happen in a couple different buildings. And yeah, I guess that's about everything. Yeah. It was cold and it was an eye opener for us, and yeah, it was tricky, but yeah, we all survived. So. What else, Kenny?
Did you suffer any major loss, like financially major damage?
No, not so much. It's all expected. We budget for the most part for stuff like this. I mean, it's hard to put a dollar amount on a major event, but we try to. We definitely carry some fluff in our budget for it. So yeah, financially, no. We paid a lot of overtime. That we did. But yeah, and then we got everybody pizza and all that stuff. When we got back at it and whatnot. So yeah. And I think that's all I have, I think. I'm sorry, I didn't have much more, and I was hoping
No,
to
that's
do
fine,
the,
that's fine.
to do the battery stuff, or I was hoping to get,
Yeah, that's a
Ron.
whole day.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything else? Good to go? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
So, so I'll backtrack a little bit because it's interesting because we, typically in the wintertime, it gets cold. And there are gonna be those cold spells and cold snaps that come through that could last a couple of days, could last several days. Or in this instance, where this extreme cold occurred, that was kind of rare for us, that I can remember, but leading up to the forecast of having this extreme temperature drops in such a quick fashion, everybody, I just remember listening to everybody and how everybody was, it was the topic of the day and everybody was getting concerned, and I'm like, geez, Buzzards Bay's frozen over before, but we're not there yet. It's just this one quick shot of cold air, but we've all lived it. If you've lived in New England, for the majority of your life, you will have seen snow events, the blizzard of '78. You will have seen that the Buzzards Bay froze over. And for me, Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island froze over, and then living here and seeing the bay. So we're used to it, but because the way the weather patterns have been of late, when we don't get snow, we're grateful for it, and when we do, we complain. But we know that it's inevitable during the winter time. But not out of the winter. There have been plenty of storms that have come up in April. As a kid, I can remember that too. So we're not totally out of the woods, but it's 52 degrees out right now. So for us, it's almost like summertime. So, but backtracking about the extreme cold, we too experienced a lot of activity here in the fire department during the 1 week. That one weekend, we answered about 110 responses, and out of those 110 responses, the vast majority of them all were related to frozen pipes. And we don't get, it's typical for us because most of the pipes that we see freeze up are either in residential structures where it's a seasonal home where people drop their temperatures, they lower their heating temps down to kind of sustain the winter, limit the amount of fuel that's being used or the electrical usage for heating. Or we have these big commercial buildings, and Brian made a good point, where you have these airflow issues where the insulation's missing in a certain part of the building, or a pipe is too close to a wall and the airflow happened to be coming from the northwest, say, and it's affecting one side of the building. And in the past, they've had freeze-ups, and they have them again, and another year they have them again, and eventually you gotta say, you gotta fix the airflow issue, and so it stops it.
Chief, can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
I'm sorry. So another thing that we have, thanks everybody.
Sure.
So most of our, we're slowly updating all of our HVAC systems and to automate them. So we've got building management systems for, I'm gonna say 70% of our buildings right now. What we can do with that is we can go in and manipulate outside air louvers. So like particularly for this storm, we said, okay, which buildings are bringing in 100% outside air? Let's knock those dampers back or off overnight, increase the heat and whatnot. So we've got that in most of our major buildings, our bigger ones, and some of our smaller ones. We recently swapped out the old wired thermostats, and we went to wireless now, so we've got them on our phones. That helped out a lot for this storm, particularly for our older houses that have little or no insulation whatsoever. Door seals are gone. I mean, they're just so old, nobody puts any money into them. But we were able to go in and from our houses say, oh, I'm gonna turn this one up, circle it up, and temperature goes up, and we left that like that, and through the duration of the storm. So that helped out a lot. So yeah, my point being, through these building management systems, you can gain so much more control over all your structures, and you can do whatever. You can increase fan speed. You can open dampers, louvers, whatever you need to do, and that's a huge plus for us, as it is with most major buildings that have those type of systems in them, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because what I was gonna, lead into eventually in my little notes here, is that even though we take for granted some of these cold spells or these weather influxes because they're short-lived, or of late, the weather service hypes it up to the point where I think they're just trying to get your attention to make sure that should the actual event be what they believe could be a very impactful storm to us, we're completely ready. And if we don't get the weather like this weekend, then, thankfully it didn't affect us, but we were ready for it. And I think that goes without saying that for all of us, we all have our own homes to take care of, and it's important to kind of take some tips out of the vast amount of information that's available for everybody to be prepared for any type of event. Should it be a natural event or a man-made event, and be able to ride it out if you had to. So in this particular event, when the temperatures are dropping the way they were, if you leave your house at 68, they're recommending that you bring it above 70 to 72. Turn your systems up. It's only for a couple of days, but it allows your pipes to be heated throughout your whole house. The system's running more, it's circulating the water, and you will end up, averting a major issue. I can't tell you if anybody's ever experienced a frozen pipe in their house, or any type of pipe break in your house, you know how stressful that is, and how devastating it can be. Because we literally had homes that the water was coming out of the second floor of the homes. We had water flowing out the fronts of the doors. We had commercial buildings that we were walking through that looked like a tropical rainforest. We were going in there and we're trying to shut the services off. And the damage that's done by water, not only is it a damage to the structure itself, it damages every single electrical component in the building. And we have to shut down not only the water services to the building, but we have to shut down the gas and the electrical services. And that involves not only us trying to isolate it, or the building managers, or just the homeowner, but then we have to involve building inspectional services from town, and Eversource in some instances, where they have to pull the meter or kill the power at the pole for us because it's so much damage. And then you have to deal with the aftermath, which is the insurance side of things, and trying to get things squared away. And let's face it, insurance being what it is, isn't necessarily on the side of the homeowner when it comes to these damage. So all in all, I think during that cold snap, we had about 60 buildings that we responded to, whether they were commercial or residential, that had damage. And some buildings we found out several days later, because somebody just happened to go by, walking their dog, and they saw water coming out of a window, and then we found out that that there was damage. In some instances, we couldn't get into the homes to shut the water off. We had to have the water department come and shut it off at the street, because we can't get into the basements because they're flooded. So that one little cold snap, intense as it was, created a lot of havoc. And if I had to put a dollar amount, I know we're like well over $1 million worth of damage to a lot of property that was happening. So if some of that could have been prevented by just preparing, if you want to, I'm trying to think of, pre-checklists, pre-this, pre-that, but preparing ahead of time to kind of avert this is within your grasp in some instances. Especially for people that go away for the summer, they can have somebody look at their home, increase the heat in their home or something like that, and not just say, yeah, I'll be fine. Because, there was a lot of homes that got damaged in that one 24-hour period. Thankfully, we didn't have any snow attached to it, so that, or a lot of snow that was attached to it, so that was good. So the other problem would have been carbon monoxide issues because of the amount of generators that were running. So the power loss that day, I think at one point we may have had 800 to 900 residents without power, and that happened as a result of the high winds that accompanied the cold snap. So Friday night into Saturday morning, when that was occurring, We had a lot of trees and limbs come down in primaries in Woods Hole, mainly along Buzzards Bay, because the wind was coming in from that direction. So we had it in West Falmouth and Woods Hole, because it was just coming right across Buzzards Bay, and it was, and the winds were really creating havoc over there. And on this side, we had a lot of shielding going on. We still had some damage, some typical south facing, as the storm changes, the winds change, we get some issues along the water. So, a very quick evolving storm can create a lot of havoc for us, and we just do what we normally do. So, for us, we expect it when we have a big cold snap. We expect sprinklers to freeze up in commercial buildings. We expect homes to develop, frozen pipes and then essentially burst. Doesn't take much for a pipe to expand around a soldered joint, and for a cast iron pipe, it's very brittle and it blows out, and we pick up pieces of it. We can piece it all together. We can find a joint that had a hole in it. It's like a little rocket, shoots out, but we find them. So these things, in some instances, can be, they can be, quelled if they, do a little bit of insulating or some, improved heating in a space that may have some, cold flow in the area. The other thing is that we, when, we'll probably get out of here a little early, which is good, but I just want to remind everybody that when we do start to see major impacts from storms, the thing for us as we start to look at, how we need to address, the areas of most concern and essentially when power and access of things are generally our critical infrastructures, the areas that we're trying to, get back on a little earlier than most. So as a resident, they want their streets plowed very quickly. They want to get their power back on quickly. But if we're trying to address governmental, activity, critical infrastructures, which would include the government, healthcare facilities, housing complexes, schools mainly. And that cold snap, we had 2 schools that had broken sprinklers in them, and thankfully they were over the weekend, and they got a lot of overtime to clean everything up. But they were able to get the schools back up and running. So we try and work with our partners, and everybody here is part of that. And we try and work to make sure that we can, at least when the storm's that big and we have the Emergency Operations Center under in full swing, and we do have a liaison with Eversource, we work to ensure we know where the issues are in the community, and then they work with us to try and primarily restore areas of greater concern or of critical infrastructure, and then they start to work their way out to try and restore power. Sometimes, like when we've seen in the past, that we've had like the entire town is affected, and it's very difficult to bring everything back. It all depends on how much equipment's been damaged. A couple of weeks ago, out of the blue, a transformer blew that was feeding Woods Hole. We had a substation issue over in Stevens Lane. They had a big electrical arc. It damaged a little bit of equipment. It knocked out the vineyard for a few hours. It also knocked out a little bit of power in town here. A couple of schools were out, but it happens that quick. And again, we're on the phone with them right away, and they help work with us to try and restore the power as quick as we can to the critical infrastructure areas. I would say people on the vineyard thought it was a very critical infrastructure day for them, but because they lost everything at once. But again, I think in the last few years we've had much more improvement. Kim can attest to that, and Boyd, that we've had much better, resource, discussions and communications on what we need to, again, focus in and gain attention on the areas that we need to get everything back up and running, so that public safety can function and address issues, and not the smaller issues, which is trash collection and all these other things that other people may think is more important. We want to make sure that we're able to get to where we need. Trees are down, we need to have tree crews, but if the trees are down with power lines, we have to have Eversource available. Only certain types of tree crews can work with Eversource. So there's a lot of coordination that has to take place, and we, you know, and we're stymied a little bit once in a while, but good coordinated effort, good collaboration helps us get through these events. On this particular day, the building services, you know, inspectors were, they had a list. Every time they came one place, we would tell them to go to another, and they just worked with us. The building inspector, the electrical inspector, the plumbing inspector, because the aftermath is they have to do all the permitting to get everybody back in line to make sure that the work that is needed is done properly and bringing them back up to code. So there's a lot to it, but we're getting used to it, and it's well coordinated. So I thought that you know, for what it was worth, I think everything is best as possible. It just dropped down to what, 20, below 20 at the peak. So it's pretty quick, just like that movie. I don't know, it was a movie where everything just plummeted. And I was like, is that what's happening out here? You know, but it was a quick event. So if anything, like I said, even though we've had a pretty mild winter, that was just kind of a blip, but it was a damaging blip for some. But you know, we'll see how the weather trend continues, and hopefully next year, you know, we run into the same. I enjoy the mild winter myself, so. But I do like the company in here when we have the actual emergency operations center going. So yeah, so I think, you know, one of the things Brian mentioned is, you know, is having these comprehensive emergency management plans. Who's great with it. They've got one. The hospital has a pretty significant one. I know the schools had one. We worked on it. They're invaluable for the staff at these particular locations or organizations. Not so much, you know, for us, you know, because we rely on facilities personnel and managers, custodians, or, you know, building supers, or whatever the case may be, to tell us about their individual buildings. And we'll work with them to try and get the resources they need, or anything that we can do to limit or help mitigate the problem on site. But we need to have the people that are familiar with the buildings, you know, assisting us, and we'll just do what we can, and we'll get people there to help them. You know, for example, and if we have a building fire somewhere, getting them housed, getting information to them about what's needed to address the insurance side of things, working with the building inspectors, doing the investigations and things like that. We all are very, you know, we all gel together when we do it, but the poor homeowner, they have a lot on their plate at that moment, and that's why we all get together. So I always tell people, listen, we're gonna have a lot of different, groups here and personnel from the town here. It's not, because we're looking for things, we're trying to find out what you're gonna need next, and we're gonna try and have them help you coordinate, getting your building back, or, what the next step is for coordinating permitting and such when contractors get involved and such. So we've been doing very well with that over the last few years, and it's fortunate that everybody is geared, to help the community. And again, that's what the LEPC is all about. It's community-based. We recognize the county's involvement too. They have a lot of resources and a lot of personnel that work full-time, that help coordinate this with the local. But Falmouth being as large as it is, and having such a robust public safety system and governmental departments, so to speak, that are addressing a lot of activity in town, I think we're very fortunate in this community. So that being said, hopefully we'll continue to get away from the winter months. We'll be headed to spring, then the summer. Then we gotta start worrying about hurricane season, which I really haven't, kind of been following yet. Maybe, I think they got new names already for the season, but I haven't heard what the activity is being forecasted yet. But I'm sure the way that the pattern is, it's, Bob will be the first person to tell you, it's one of these 100-year storms. We haven't had one in a long time, so we might have, more than something coming out of the keyhole. So, especially down in Woods Hole, So, anyways, so we'll continue to address things. Kim oversees a lot of the social media platform with Boyd and we try and put things out, I encourage people to, you know, in this room and others to just, you know, to look for things that might be available to them information-wise. They might not have thought of something when they're preparing for a storm or thinking ahead in case of an emergency, but anything we can do to help anybody or organizations, you know, please don't hesitate to ask, and I appreciate everybody coming, you know, to our monthly meetings, and we'll have another one coming up next, you know, in April, thank God, April. And we'll continue to do what we do best, which is, you know, support one another. So thank you for coming. If there's any questions, comments, anything else you want to add, Boyd, you look like you're ready to go.
I'm speechless.
Captain Lowen, anything from the police side of things? Ham operators? Adrian? Brian? Yeah,
The day after tomorrow,
what's that?
That's
the day after tomorrow.
that movie.
Oh, yeah, the day, okay, so there you go, yeah, so,
Good job, Ian.
See,
yeah, that's all I can see is helicopters flying.
Yeah.
Don't be on a helicopter during the snows. Anyway, so, thank you. All right, well, we'll get out of here a little early, and thanks to FCTV for their ongoing, you know, recording and telecasting of this great event. Glad to get the information out there, and you know, I hope everybody has a great rest of the day and enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll keep working. All right, thank you all. Have a great day.